Hey Tucson friends! Are you or someone you know a local Tucson business owner who's looking to expand their visibility, grow their brand, and engage more with their community? Well, I want to talk to you. Don't just be a listener. Come on the show and interview. Showcase your business. Tell us all about your story. Tell about the highs, the lows, and how you serve the Tucson community. We would love to hear what you have to say and hear the intricacies of your business. Humanize your brand, position yourself as a thought leader, and get in front of more eyes and ears. Click the link below and star on an episode. I look forward to talking with you. Now back to the show. Welcome to T-Lokes, Tucson's local business podcast. I'm your host, L. Connor McEverly, and in each episode, we embark on a journey to connect with the passionate minds behind the businesses and nonprofits that make our community thrive. Join me as I sit down with the owners, visionaries, and change makers who pour their hearts into shaping the local landscape. We explore the challenges, triumphs, and unique journeys that define Tucson's business community. From the corner coffee shop to the innovative startups and impactful nonprofits, T-Lokes is your window into the diverse stories that make our city special. Tune in and get ready to get connected. This is T-Lokes. Howdy, folks, and welcome to T-Lokes, your Tucson local business podcast. I'm your host, L. Connor McEverly, and joining me via virtual chat today is the founder and owner of H.E.A.L, a service that empowers those experiencing grief to nurture their well-being, reconnecting them with joy, passion, and purpose, all to heal from within. It is my pleasure to introduce to the show TC Chicago. TC, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Connor. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Yeah,
absolutely.
So while we are here to discuss the upcoming release of your H.E.A.L program, if you wouldn't mind, can you take a brief moment to tell us more about your services and background?
Sure, absolutely. Well, Connor, I really like to think of myself as an educator. My education is in psychology, and over the years, I've been in sales, business management, and leadership. And about a decade ago, I began moving into the wellness space, and that has included being a yoga instructor, a breath coach, specializing in nervous system regulation for stress management and anxiety management. I also am a sound practitioner, which focuses on restoration of the nervous system. I use a guided meditation and instruments such as singing bowls, harps, drums, to using their healing frequencies to bring people's nervous systems into a state of rest and digest, an easy way to hack our brain, if you will, allowing people to really rest. And I've also been guiding clients through the process of loss, giving them guidance in how to navigate hard times in their lives through the scope of grief. And all of this really has culminated into the H.E.A.L program.
Right. So, I mean, let's dig right into that. What is the mission of H.E.A.L and what kind of started that for you?
Sure. Well, let me just define grief because we typically don't talk about it. Grief is the natural reaction to any loss, the loss of any kind. And that includes death and divorce, but there are over 40 different types of loss. Everyone universally has experienced loss. It's really the one thing that we all have in common.
Yeah.
And grief is the natural reaction to that. And everybody's grief experience looks a little bit different, sometimes a lot different. And our society just doesn't really provide us with complete tools in order, or a roadmap, really, to navigate through all of the complexities of that. There are cognitive things that we're telling, the story of our losses, the emotions that we feel, the physical effects that we can have from unprocessed grief. So really what I provide is a complete roadmap that brings in all aspects, that looks at grief and healing from grief from a holistic standpoint, which means we
Right.
recognize all aspects of humans. We're physical beings, but we're also emotional, spiritual,
Right.
intellectual. So it's really a culmination of a lot of the work that I've done and a lot of my experiences that I've gone through and the losses that have occurred in my life.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's a lot to say about grief. I mean, and the way that I've heard about it mostly, I think, in society or in like common conversation is mostly around like the loss of life that someone experiences. I'm interested. Can you give me like a couple examples of other forms of loss?
Sure, absolutely. Well, that is typically what people think when I say I'm a grief recovery specialist or a
Right.
grief heal, an educator.
Hmm.
And people will say, "Oh, my friend Susie just lost her dad. I'm going to tell her about you." So people typically do think of grief as losing somebody to death
Right.
or a divorce, the loss of a relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are, as I mentioned, there are over 40 different types of loss. So
Yeah.
let's think about maybe when we were, oh, let's say 14 years old in the height
Right.
of puberty, and we fell in love with the little boy or little girl who sat next to us, in math class.
Yeah.
And we either told that person we liked them or we started a dating relationship, quote
Sure.
unquote, with that person. And
Yeah.
somehow the relationship ended and we were rejected.
Hmm.
So that's a loss of a relationship. It wasn't a marriage, but it was a
Yeah.
relationship. Uh, Maybe we had our first little kitty cat or puppy dog, and
Hmm.
at an early age, that animal died, and
Yeah.
that is a huge loss. Maybe grandma, grandpa died.
Hmm.
Maybe we were in an abusive situation as a child or
Yeah.
an adult, and we lost trust, or we
Okay.
lost faith, maybe in our parents or an early childhood caregiver because maybe they didn't tell us the truth about something. And we realized that somehow we just weren't safe. So, loss of safety.
Hmm.
I work with a lot of
Yeah.
people that have experienced some sort of early childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And there are so many losses associated with that loss of body autonomy, loss of trust, loss of
Yeah.
safety. And those
Yeah.
early childhood losses really do set a blueprint for other relationships and
Yeah.
the way that we look at life, the lenses, right? It sets our belief system
Yeah.
or our BS. And then the tools that society gives us, if we're hurting because of the loss of an early childhood pet or an early childhood boyfriend or girlfriend,
Right.
we go to mom and dad and we say, "Gosh, I don't feel good. I'm really hurting." And
Hmm.
mom and dad are only equipped to the extent that they were equipped from their parents, and
Right.
they might give us some misconceptions about loss, maybe like,
Yeah.
"Oh, time will heal that,"
Hmm.
or we'll get another dog and that will make it feel better." So then we
Right.
begin to believe that we can replace the loss, or then
Mm.
we begin to believe that, don't feel bad, don't cry. Well,
Right.
that's natural.
Yeah.
So it just begins to set in our early minds
Yeah.
a blueprint of how we deal with it. And incomplete information really is what we've been given by society or
Yeah.
well-meaning parents or caregivers or educators that
Sure.
pass along information to us, but that information just isn't complete, and sometimes it can be
Right.
really harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm no expert here, but like I know that in terms of like trauma and relationships, I mean, healing work and a lot of psychology, like it's developed a lot over the past couple decades, and so the tools that, someone like me, like, 30-year-old person has been given as opposed to, my parents who are, mid 50s closing in on 60, like are wildly different, so that is really interesting.
Sure,
Yeah, and hearing
absolutely.
the many different like forms of loss that kind of cascade from certain events. Absolutely. That's really
Sure.
interesting.
Sure. And
Um,
when you look at whether it's grief,
yeah,
whether it's trauma, PTSD, any of the anxiety or depression, any of the symptoms that we begin to have
yeah,
can really all be traced back to a loss. and we're are grieving that loss in some shape or form, and then the manifestation can become the trauma, the complex trauma, which we know
Right.
affects the brain and the nervous system, then affects the body,
Mhm.
or the different symptoms of anxiety, different symptoms. So as you said, that's a beautiful
Yeah.
word. It really cascades. It's all
Yeah.
really intertwined into this beautiful human makeup of our experience of being human. And
Absolutely.
so having a roadmap with really effective tools
Yeah.
is really essential.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a helpful tool, and doing a little bit of my research before our talk, I noticed that. So for our listeners, if you look at the Instagram or something, you see that HEAL is also an acronym.
Yeah.
HEAL, and it kind of reveals, your approach to healing from grief. And would you mind kind of like telling us what that acronym is, unpacking that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And Connor, I'll do that in two steps because it's kind
Perfect.
of like I have a double entendre, like a double acronym.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the program, it really describes my program, looking at it from kind of a marketing standpoint, really. What is this?
Right.
And so the H stands for holistic understanding.
Mhm.
Grief is a multifaceted experience that impacts emotional, mental, and physical well being.
Yeah.
E stands for empowering with education. Healing begins when the individual begins to take that personal responsibility for their healing process through education and actionable steps. The A is the program is really adaptable. So, adaptability, it's flexible, it's self paced, it's online. This curriculum allows participants to adapt their learning and healing to their personal needs and schedule.
Nice.
And then the L stands for love, rediscovering the ability to love life after loss,
Yeah.
loving ourselves, loving others. It really focuses on nurturing your emotional well-being, helping you to reconnect with all of the fun parts of life once we get
Right.
out from underneath that.
Howdy, listener. This is Connor. Thank you so much for listening to our episode today. If you find these interviews enriching, one of the easiest ways you can help this show is to leave a rating and a review. If you go into your podcast player, for Apple Podcasts, if you scroll beneath all of the episodes, you'll find a spot where you can rate and review. If you just click that and add a review, that helps others find these impactful episodes and hear the valuable insights of the people who are the heartbeat of the Tucson community. So if you have a moment, please do that. It really helps the show. It really helps me out. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your support. Toodaloo.
And then secondly, what I call the HEAL components, HEAL. Now,
Yeah.
these are actually action steps that are part of the course. And so remember that heal is a verb.
Yeah.
So action, we can talk about something all day long, but until we're actually taking action, doing the work, sometimes it's really hard work, but
Yeah.
doing the work. And the verb heal means to make healthy or whole again.
Yeah.
So with the heal, the H, each of these have two meanings, two words. Honor, to honor our story and memories associated with the loss.
Mhm.
Hope, to maintain a sense of hope even in the midst of the grief, recognizing that this is natural and having the tools to move through these things.
Yeah.
Embrace, to accept the reality of the loss. Express, to be able to articulate the feelings and the truth associated with this loss.
Yeah.
Acknowledge, recognize the feelings that come along with the loss, accept those feelings, allowing them to be processed fully.
Yeah.
And then the L, to let go, releasing any lingering feelings of anger, resentment,
Yeah.
which is essential for forgiveness. And then again, the last, love,
Mhm.
fostering self-love and compassion during this healing process.
Yeah.
And also giving it to others, maybe that have hurt us, that have created these losses in our lives. So a lot to
Yeah.
unpack there.
A ton. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot there, but what I gather is that in your programs, you really honor the individual stories that people are going through. All of us are unique tapestries of our experiences, and we all react differently. And it sounds like this is a very personalized, venture, a very personalized journey towards healing. And,
Absolutely.
I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about kind of this work you do and what you're offering folks. I want to ask, like, what was a first moment of achievement or like a milestone for you?
Sure. Well, the first milestone really for me was when I was introduced to tools that actually allowed me to begin my healing work.
Yeah.
And that was in the midst of a divorce from a
Mm.
25-year marriage,
Yeah.
and learning that I really had the ability to change things in my life. And so taking these components, not these exact components, but another program that really introduced me to grief. I didn't realize I
Right.
was grieving.
Yeah.
And so when I began to learn about grief and loss and how to process things through in in a holistic manner, intellectually with my mind, with my heart, the feelings somatically with my body, processing
Mhm.
the emotions physically through my body, and then coming out on the other side. That was really a defining moment for me, taking the
Yeah.
education that I was receiving and using
Yeah.
it to empower my own healing and
Right.
moving away from what was a very abusive situation. And it was very frightening, and it was very, very, very frightening and
Oh,
very scary, really,
yeah.
to think about, my life is going to be looking 100% different, but
Mhm.
having the right tools and really taking the time to put in the work with these tools,
Yeah.
that was the defining moment. And then when I began teaching this to others,
Yeah.
hearing their feedback and seeing the effective changes that were going on in their lives, that
Mhm.
they were coming out of depressions, that their anxiety was beginning to lessen. They were
Mhm.
seeing more of a hope for their future.
Yeah.
Clarity of focus of their goals was coming back.
Yeah.
So that's really, you said very personalized story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a very personal story, and this program has been written out of my story, my losses, the
Right.
tools that I have received, and taking the advice of other experts,
Right.
and and really beginning to make it a complete roadmap in order for people to not only use once, but to go back time and time again, because we
Yeah.
in our lives we tend to sort of cycle back, and we have different
Sweet.
seasons of our lives.
Yeah.
So recognizing my own healing was a milestone, and then
Mhm.
moving that through to begin to help others was really, a twofold milestone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, not only to heal, but then to share that healing with others is a profound experience, right?
Very profound. It's hard work witnessing the
Yeah.
grief and the loss and hearing stories. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
really overwhelming hearing other stories and seeing the immense amount of pain that people are in.
Right.
Um, but also knowing that this works, and knowing that on the other side of it,
Yeah.
that that they come out and they can, begin to see the light again, and begin to produce for themselves the life that they truly want to live, and they don't have
Yeah.
to live under the heaviness of the grief.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine. We're talking a little bit about these, achievements and milestones. Let's kind of flip the coin a little bit. What's a challenge that you're experiencing, or maybe a common misconception about what you do?
Sure. Well, you hit on it, Connor. The common misconception is that grief only has to do with death, the
Yeah.
death of a physical person. But
Right.
there's so many different losses. And
Yeah.
so when I say grief, I always use that interchangeably with loss, because grief is
Yeah.
just the reaction to the losses. So
Absolutely.
really trying to educate, because our society hasn't educated properly. So I think that might be I don't want to say a pitfall, but that's probably the biggest stumbling block. People's misconception
Yeah.
of, oh, I'm not grieving anybody. I haven't lost anybody.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at some of the other losses. And
Right.
also, not that I try to talk anybody into doing the work. People are on their own path, and when they're ready, they're
Right.
ready. But but seeing people really that are suffering, that are in distress,
Yeah.
that just have absolutely no idea where to even start. There's no
Yeah.
there's no map. And they've tried so many different things and they're like, if I have to read another book, I'm just gonna, scream.
Yeah.
So really just kind of getting people, kind of herded into,
Yeah.
the space to where they're ready to take a few little nuggets
Yeah.
as to, the education portion and then going, oh, that sounds like it would be really effective for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, through my limited experience, like managing grief or processing grief and trying to heal from that, like it's kind of like wading through brambles, it's like it's a really
Yeah.
painful experience. So I can imagine it is difficult to find people who are like, yeah, let's go ahead and just plunge right into these. But
Yep.
it is always important to know that like on the other side of those, there's greener pastures, so to speak. Like there's always something to have hope for.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, which consistently takes us back to that education component.
Right.
Like, you're a podcast specialist. You
Yeah.
know all about sound and about production, and how would you get to that end result if you hadn't educated yourself on the different components of
Totally.
of how that process works?
Right.
So so with the grief heal, it's just a roadmap to help
Yeah.
us understand. There's a little bit of psychology, there's a little bit of physical,
Yeah.
information. It's really all about knowing who we are, self-awareness. How does
Yeah.
my brain work? How does the
Yeah.
body work? Not that you have to know all of this. If you're a total
Right.
geek like me, you want to know all of it. But
Right.
the way the program is laid out is it's very simple. There's a video of me speaking, doing a little teaching component.
Yeah.
There's an anecdotal video that shares stories of others. There's some additional written information,
Yeah.
some journaling prompts. I do a guided meditation with each chapter to help
Nice.
people really understand the physical component of relaxing the nervous system. And I
Right.
bring in experts from all over the country that have that really have honed in on their skills, that
Right.
really brings some great supplemental information.
Yeah. Wow. It seems like you have a lot of great resources for people. It's
That's the
pretty,
magic.
yeah, pretty jam packed, right?
Yeah,
So
I wrote this alone, but I didn't do it alone.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, most great things like we are never alone, right? We're always working with people. I can't make this podcast without you and the wonderful guests who grace my show, right? So
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk more about your upcoming Heal program. From my understanding, it's a virtual course that helps people navigate their grief, allows for individual pacing, a private experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about this program?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's all online. It's
Okay.
self-paced. There are 12 chapters, I will call them. And so there it gives very specific information in a very specific order,
Mhm.
educating first, really trying to reframe our belief system on what grief is, what
Right.
grief isn't, and then some really practical tools on looking at losses, looking at relationships, and then applying those heal components. The action steps that we need to take. Speaking our truth, healing is telling the emotional truth about your story is
Yeah.
essential to healing.
Right.
And we all don't have that. We all haven't had that platform to be able to speak that truth. So,
Right.
it's very adaptable. You can do it in 12 days if you want. You can do it in 12 hours if you want. I don't
Right.
recommend that because I
Yeah.
like to let people have processing time and really
Totally.
a space to understand. But
Yeah.
self-paced, do it when you need to take more
Yeah.
time on the deeper issues. Some of the chapters really get into deeper issues, the emotions, and a lot of times when memories start to surface or when
Yeah.
emotions start to surface,
Right.
it can be quite challenging, and we really need a little bit more space to process that.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't seem like healing through grief is like a bingeable thing you can do.
Right. It's not a Netflix episode.
Exactly. There's a lot that goes into it, though. Rewatching is never a bad idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I go back through, and I've been doing
Yeah.
this for 10 years. I go back through because because loss is happening all the time. When we
Yeah.
look at a relationship, sometimes it's going really well. Other times it seems like there could be,
Yeah.
miscommunication, or there could be things that maybe have been said that have offended us. And
Right.
so I regularly go back and use these tools in, my active relationships now. If something
Right.
hits me wrong, I have good communication skills and I really do try to go straight to that person. But some things that might not be the easiest conversation, I
Yeah.
just kind of work out here in my own heart
Yeah.
and process them through, and then really watch how I start to soften and I start to change.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving forward a little bit, you know, we talk a lot about grief, and maybe someone who's experiencing maybe for someone who is experiencing grief, it is hard to really understand that they are, or maybe what patterns they're falling into. So, for someone like that, what might a person be experiencing that indicates that they should reach out to you?
Absolutely. So there's a huge range of experiences that people can be having once they experience a loss. Sometimes it can be foggy brain
Hmm.
because things have shifted so much in their life and they can't really grab a hold of what's happening.
Right.
Sometimes it can look like anxiety, panic feelings in the body. Sometimes it can look like depression or sleeping a lot. Sometimes it can look like changes in eating habits. I'm eating too much or I don't want to eat anything.
Right.
Sometimes it can begin to manifest as physical pain in the body
Hmm.
where there hasn't really been an injury or any reason why the pain should be there.
Right.
Or it can begin to even manifest as disease or
Ooh.
dis-ease. A lot
Yeah.
of autoimmune disease, really the root of them is very, very emotional. There's been
Mhm.
a traumatic a trauma event or a loss,
Right.
and somehow it physically landed in their body.
Mm.
And I have some great references about somatic healing, and
Yeah.
there's some really great books out there that talk about how buried
Mm.
feelings never die, or the
Right.
body keeps the score. This physical body
Yeah.
is the house of all these emotions, and these emotions or energy in motion, if they're
Hmm.
stuck, if we haven't actively processed them, they
Yeah.
can begin to look like physical pain or emotional pain. So, they can
Yeah.
begin to look like, again, that the anxiety, the depression,
Right.
or a
Totally.
general feeling that my life just isn't going the way I want it, and I
Right.
really don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Totally fair. Right.
Yeah.
So for folks right now that like they're hearing this and that's resonating with them, they want to get in touch with you. For those who want to learn more about Grief Heal and hear more about your insights, where can they go?
Sure, absolutely. The website is www.griefheal.org,
Okay.
or I'm also on Instagram as Grief Heal. I also, for all of my yoga and all of my sound,
Yeah.
that you can find me there on tcchicago.com. So
Okay.
I've got all of my platforms for social media.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah. And folks, we have those links in the episode notes. So if you want to get in contact with TC, just check out the episode notes and the links will be right there for you.
absolutely.
So, TC, it's been great talking with you about Grief Heal, about grief, your approach to healing. But unfortunately, we do have to kind of start winding down here. So, I have a couple
Sure,
more questions for you. So,
absolutely.
we are recording this right now about mid November. This will be released about mid December. With that in mind, do you have any events coming up in the near future that people should keep an eye out for?
Absolutely. I do a sound healing at Flourish Yoga in Northwest Tucson monthly.
Nice.
And so, if anybody, November 23rd is the next one. And also, December 15th is actually the Grounded in Grief workshop, where we'll be talking about grief and we'll be doing some breath work.
Yeah.
We'll be doing some movement, really talking about grief and how it affects the nervous system.
Right.
And so December 28th
Awesome.
is the Flourish Yoga Sound Healing. So if
Nice.
people want to come and experience an hour and a half of guided meditation with sound, really relaxing the nervous system, having a really cool guided experience and brain hack, I call it, or
Yeah.
kindergarten nap time.
Yeah. I mean, that felt like a brain hack back then. I'll tll you what. A good
Yeah,
nap still
right?
feels good. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, folks,
Absolutely.
go ahead and check out the episode notes. There are going to be links to these events and links to TC's socials where you can stay up to date on everything that's going on. All right. Well, TC, I have one last question for you today.
Go ahead.
What is one out of the many things that you love about Tucson?
One out of the many things I love about Tucson. Wow.
It's a hard question.
You, I am a native Arizonan. I was born in Bisbee. I was
Nice.
raised in Oracle on the other side of the Catalinas, and Tucson has
Yeah.
been my home since 1990.
Yeah.
And what I love about Tucson is my community. Being here for over 35 years, I have many different communities, whether it's my church community, whether it's my yoga community, whether it was my past real estate sales community or my current wellness community.
Yeah.
I really love the hearts of people here in Tucson because they truly have, the ones I encounter anyways, they truly have a desire to be neighborly. They truly have a desire to be helpful and to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've lived here for about 12 years now, and we have a really vibrant community and a lot of really dedicated and lovely people that comprise this city. We have that, someone mentioned it before, where it was like it's a small town feel, but a big city.
Very much so. It's a very small town feel. And we're at like 1 million with the outer lying areas, right? Which isn't small.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I meet people all the time that there's somebody in common with, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, it is really lovely.
Yeah.
Well, TC, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for talking to us about Grief Heal, your insights on grief and healing. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Connor. It's been an honor.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, thank you folks for tuning in, and until next time, toodaloo.
And that's a wrap for another episode of T-Lokes, your go-to podcast for uncovering the untold stories of Tucson's local businesses and nonprofits. A big thank you to our incredible listeners for joining us on this journey of connection and discovery. I want to extend a huge thank you to TC Chicago for coming on the show today, talking with us about the many varied forms of grief, and also telling us about her H.E.A.L program and the very flexible ways in which it can help people navigate really hard parts of their lives. Show them some love and check out their links in the episode notes. A big thank you to Louis Sanders from Sound Monk Studios for composing the awesome T-Lokes theme music. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected with Tucson's vibrant business scene, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback is invaluable, and it helps us continue bringing you engaging conversations. As we wrap up, remember that T-Lokes isn't just a podcast, it's a community. Let's keep the conversation going on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or our Discord channel and share your thoughts, suggestions, or even recommend a local business or nonprofit you'd like to see featured on the show. Thank you once again for being a part of the T-Lokes community. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep supporting the heartbeat of Tucson. Toodaloo.